In today's video, I'm going to show you how to create pivot table which can compare the same weekdays across the possible weeks like this automatically, where you can just update the raw data and you refresh the pivot table and it will always compare the most recent weekdays across the possible weeks. Alright, and let's dive into that. I'll be showing you 3 methods, and each method has their own pros and cons and also depends on the application as well. Let's start with the first method, which I name it as hard-coded weekday. This is my raw data, and I'll be creating a new column to evaluate whether the day is the day that I need. And let's name it as its target day. Right, basically I am comparing all the yesterday's weekday with the possible week's yesterday's weekday. So if yesterday is Tuesdays, then I'll be comparing all the Tuesdays possible weeks. I am using all function for this formula. And first condition is that the day is equals to today minus 1, which is yesterday. And next is the date equals to today minus 8 for last week. Alright, so same with the rest. Alright, then now I got the false and true for each of the row. And this is the pivot table for this raw data. So what I'll do now is to refresh this pivot table, and I'll be putting the new column that I've just created, that is target day, and I'll be filtering all the true. Alright, because today is Wednesday, so yesterday is Tuesdays, and I'm comparing all the past few weeks Tuesdays. And if tomorrow I have the new data for Wednesdays, then I can just update in my raw data and I just refresh, then it will automatically update to the new yesterday, which is Wednesdays for tomorrow yesterday. Let's move on to the next method, which is dynamic weeks. Alright, in this method, I will be using also a few conditions, but I make it more dynamic, as in you can input the number of weeks that you want to compare. Because for the last method, it is hard-coded, so I can only compare 4 weeks for the possible weeks. And over here in this dynamic weeks, I'll be showing you how to do it more dynamically, where you can set how many weeks that you want to compare. Alright, so let's do this, where you can input a number over here. So let's set it as 4 of us. And I'll be creating a new column as well. For this method, I'll be using AND function because all of the conditions must be fulfilled. Alright, so the first condition is that the weekday of the date must be equals to the weekday of today minus 1, which is yesterday. Alright, and the next condition is that the date must be greater than today minus 7 for 7 days a week multiplied by this input. And I'm pressing F4 to make this absolute reference. So both of these conditions must be fulfilled. And now I got the true and false as well. And right over the pivot, I just refresh and then I put in the new column and it must be a true. And now I am comparing the past 4 weeks, including yesterday. And if I want to compare 5 weeks, I can just put in the 5, and now I got all the 5 weeks. And same if I want to compare 6 weeks, then I can just type in the 6 and then I refresh, then I got all the 6 weeks data. Alright, so let's move on to the third method, which is selectable weekday. Because for the last 2 methods, the hard-coded weekday and the dynamic weeks, both of them are only comparing yesterday's weekday. What if we need to compare some other weekday other than yesterday's weekday? If that's the case, then the last two methods are not a really good options or method to use. So let's take a look at this third method. I'll be putting two inputs where the users can put in like how many number of weeks and also the weekdays over here. So for example, if I want to take a look at all the Mondays for the 4 week recent weeks. And same as before, I'll be creating a new column. And I am using AND function as well. The first condition is that the day, because we got the day column over here, must be equals to the weekday input over here. And the next condition is that the date must be larger or equals to today minus 7 for 7 days a week multiplied by this number of weeks. All right, then I will put in the absolute reference for both of this input. All right, so these two are the conditions, and now I press enter. Now I got my true and false as well. And in this pivot table, I just refresh and put in the new column that we have just created and then filter to true. And now I got all the Monday for the 4 weeks. And if I want to compare Sunday, I can just put Sunday. And if I want to do it 5 weeks, then I just refresh. Then it will be all 5 weeks of the Sundays. You can also put in data validation for this weekday input so that the users won't mistype anything for this weekday. And that's all for this tutorial. Basically, all three methods has their own pros and cons and their own application. If you are doing daily reports where you pull data every day and you're comparing the yesterday's data, then this hard-coded weekday and dynamic weeks are both very good method. But if you need more dynamic, whereby sometimes you want to compare some other weekday and other times you want to compare the other weekdays, then the selectable weekday would be good for you. So it depends on the application. Alright, that's all for today's tutorial. If you find this tutorial useful, make sure to like, follow or subscribe me, and I will see you in the next tutorial. Goodbye.